The hammer came down with a sickening crash. Metal met plastic and glass, and my laptop exploded in a shower of sparks. I watched my sister swing again, her face twisted in something between rage and triumph. The screen shattered completely. Pieces scattered across my desk. My chest tightened as I realized what she was doing. $4.5 million. That's what the files on that laptop proved she had stolen from our family trust. She thought destroying the evidence would save her. I stood frozen, my hands trembling at my sides. She didn't even look at me as she raised the hammer for a third strike. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. My carefully organized spreadsheets, emails, and bank records seemed to vanish with each blow. She was laughing now, a cold, satisfied sound that made my stomach turn. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My sister, my own blood, had just tried to erase proof of her massive fraud right in front of me. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have imagined, was that I had prepared for exactly this moment. I staggered backward, my legs barely holding me up. The room spun around me. "Why are you doing this?" The words tore from my throat, raw and broken. My voice cracked on the last word. She lowered the hammer, wiping her forehead like she'd just finished hard work. Her smirk cut through me deeper than any blade could. "You wouldn't understand, Frankie," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. The way she said my name, like I was a child who needed protection from adult realities. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my sister, the person I'd defended countless times, the one I'd trusted with my deepest secrets, standing in my office with a hammer, destroying evidence of her crimes. My hands shook uncontrollably. Rage and disbelief fought for control inside me. How long had she been stealing? How many times had I missed the signs? The questions swirled in my mind, making me dizzy. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake her until she explained. But I just stood there, frozen, watching her walk toward the door like she'd done nothing wrong at all. My name is Frankie Tate, and I've always been the responsible one in our family. While my sister chased excitement and took risks, I managed the boring details. I balanced checkbooks, organized family events, and mediated arguments. Everyone called me the peacemaker. My parents trusted me completely. When they set up the family trust 5 years ago, they asked me to help manage the paperwork. I said yes because that's what I did, I helped. I never questioned. I never suspected. My sister was charming, spontaneous, and everyone's favorite. She had a way of lighting up a room the moment she walked in. People gravitated toward her energy. Meanwhile, I worked quietly in the background, making sure everything ran smoothly. I thought we were a team. I thought she valued my support. Looking back now, I realized how naive that was. She hadn't valued anything except what she could take. And standing in my destroyed office, watching her leave with that smirk, I understood something crucial. I had always been the responsible one, yes. But that didn't mean I had to be the victim. That role ended today. A memory flashed through my mind as I stood among the laptop's remains. 3 months ago, I'd noticed something odd in the family trust account. A wire transfer for $75,000 to an account I didn't recognize. When I asked my sister about it during a family dinner, she'd laughed it off. Just moving some investments around, she'd said with a casual wave of her hand. "You worry too much, Frankie." I'd let it go. Then came the phone calls. Late at night, she'd step outside to take them, her voice dropping to whispers. When she returned, she'd act perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened. I'd thought maybe she was dating someone new. Then the closed-door meetings started. She'd lock herself in the study with financial documents spread across the desk. Whenever I walked by, she'd quickly shuffle papers together or minimize screens on her computer. "Just boring trust stuff," she'd say if I asked. But it wasn't boring trust stuff. It was theft. Systematic, calculated theft spread across months, maybe years. She'd been embezzling from our family, from the trust our parents had built to secure all our futures. And I had been the last obstacle standing between her and complete success. I sat down on the floor beside my destroyed laptop, my back against the desk. My breathing slowed. The initial shock began to fade, replaced by something colder and more focused. She thought destruction meant victory. She thought smashing the laptop erased the evidence. The satisfaction in her voice as she walked away told me she believed she'd won. But my sister had always underestimated me. She saw me as the boring, predictable one who followed rules and avoided conflict. She never imagined I might be prepared for exactly this scenario. 2 weeks ago, after noticing too many suspicious transactions, I'd backed up everything. Not to an external drive she could find and destroy. Not to a cloud service she could access. I'd sent encrypted files to my professional IT consultant, someone she didn't know existed. Every spreadsheet detailing the fraudulent transfers, every email where she'd authorized withdrawals, every bank record showing money disappearing from the trust and reappearing in her personal accounts. All of it sat safely in multiple locations she couldn't touch. I closed my eyes and let my heartbeat return to normal. No screaming. No chaos. Just cold, measured thoughts forming a plan. She wanted war. She'd get precision instead. 3 days later, I sat in Malcolm's office. He owned a data recovery service downtown, a small shop that didn't look like much from the outside. But Malcolm was brilliant with computers. I'd found him through a colleague years ago when another friend needed help recovering files from a damaged hard drive. Now I needed that same expertise. Malcolm examined the destroyed laptop, whistling low under his breath. Someone really wanted this dead, he said, turning the shattered device over in his hands. Can you recover anything? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He looked up at me, his eyes sharp behind thick glasses. The hard drive is damaged but not completely destroyed. Give me 48 hours. Those 48 hours felt like years. But when I returned, Malcolm had worked his magic. He handed me a new laptop with every single file restored. Spreadsheets appeared on the screen exactly as I'd organized them. Bank statements loaded perfectly. Emails opened without corruption. I watched months of evidence materialize before my eyes, vindication pulsing through my veins. My sister had thought technology was her enemy. She didn't understand it could also be mine. Every transaction she'd tried to hide now sat in front of me, ready to expose her completely. She hadn't anticipated patience, precision, or professional help. I almost missed it. I was walking past the guest room in our parents' house when I heard my sister's voice through the partially open door. Something in her tone made me stop. I stood perfectly still in the hallway, barely breathing. I told you, it's handled, she said into her phone, her voice smug and confident. Frankie had some files, but I took care of it. Smashed the laptop myself. You should have seen her face. She laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. She's too soft to do anything anyway. She'll cry about it for a week and then move on. That's how she is. A pause as the person on the other end spoke. The money? All safe. I transferred most of it to the offshore account last month. Even if someone looked now, they wouldn't find anything unusual. I've covered every track. Another pause. Trust me, Frankie's the responsible one, remember? She follows rules. She doesn't fight back. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding. Every word she spoke became evidence. Her arrogance was staggering. She truly believed I'd just accept what happened and move on. She had no idea I could hear everything. No idea that her boasting would become the rope she'd hang herself with. I pulled out my phone and started a voice recording app, capturing the rest of her conversation word for word. 2 days later, I walked into our parents' dining room where my sister sat working on her tablet. I kept my expression neutral, almost friendly. Hey, have you seen that document about the trust's annual review? I asked casually. I can't find it anywhere. She didn't even look up. Why would I know where your papers are, Frankie? You're the organized one, remember? She laughed, the sound dismissive and condescending. Maybe you lost it when you got all emotional about your laptop. The jab was intentional, designed to make me feel small. To remind me that she'd destroyed my work and gotten away with it. I smiled slightly and pulled a folder from my bag. Oh, I found it. Actually, I printed a copy last week. Just wanted to see if you'd seen it. I placed the document on the table in front of her. Her eyes flickered to it, then back to her tablet. But I saw it, just for a second, the way her jaw tightened. The tiny crack in her composure. She'd assumed that document was gone forever, buried in the destroyed laptop's memory. Seeing it printed, organized, and intact threw her off balance. That tiny, calm victory tasted sweeter than rage. It was the first of many small moments where I'd show her that I wasn't as defeated as she thought. Each one would chip away at her confidence bit by bit. She struck at me from a different angle the following week. I arrived at work Monday morning to find my supervisor waiting at my desk, his expression serious. Frankie, we need to talk about the Richardson report, he said, holding up a folder. My stomach dropped. The Richardson report was a critical project I'd completed 2 weeks ago. There are significant errors in the financial projections. Numbers don't match. It's caused some concern with the client. I felt the blood drain from my face. I'd triple-checked those numbers. There was no way there were errors. Then I understood. My sister had access to the shared company drive through her occasional consulting work for our firm. She'd sabotaged my report, changing numbers to make me look incompetent. She wanted me to crumble under professional pressure. To seem unreliable. To lose credibility before I could expose her fraud. Can I see the file? I asked, keeping my voice calm. He handed it over. I pulled up my email and showed him the original report I'd sent to myself as a backup the day I submitted it. Then I opened the server logs showing exactly when the file had been modified, 3 days ago, long after I'd completed it, and the login credentials used. My sister's credentials. My supervisor's expression changed from concern to understanding. I see. Thank you for showing me this, Frankie. I'll address this immediately. Her plan had backfired in real time. The cracks started showing at the family barbecue. My cousin walked up to me while I was getting lemonade, her voice low and concerned. Is everything okay with your sister? She asked. I looked at her carefully, keeping my expression neutral. What do you mean? She glanced across the yard where my sister stood talking to our aunt, her gestures animated and her laugh just a little too loud. She just seems off lately. Kind of defensive about weird things. Last week I asked about her new car, just making conversation, and she got really snappy. Said it was none of my business how she afforded it. I nodded slowly, saying nothing. Another family friend approached later, mentioning similar observations. My sister had been acting strange at gatherings, avoiding certain conversations, getting irritated when people asked normal questions. I didn't have to say anything. I simply listened, nodded sympathetically, and let them draw their own conclusions. The seeds of doubt were planting themselves without any effort from me. People were noticing her odd behavior, her defensive reactions, her sudden lifestyle improvements that didn't match her reported income. I never spoke negatively about her. Never hinted at the fraud. I just let her own actions speak for themselves. Sometimes the best revenge is simply stepping back and letting someone's true nature reveal itself to everyone watching. I made the call on a Tuesday afternoon. The certified auditor's name was Mr. Patterson, and he specialized in family trust investigations. He had a reputation for being thorough, discreet, and brutally accurate. I need a complete review of our family trust, I told him during our first meeting. Something doesn't add up, and I want to know exactly what's happening with the finances. He asked me to provide whatever documentation I had access to. I gave him everything. bank statements, transfer records, investment reports, and the files I'd recovered from my destroyed laptop. He spread them across his conference table, his expression growing more serious with each page he reviewed. "This will take about 3 weeks," he said finally. "But from what I'm seeing already, there are significant irregularities." Those 3 weeks crawled by. But when Mr. Patterson called me back to his office, he had a complete report ready. He'd found every fraudulent transfer, every falsified document, every shell company my sister had created to hide stolen money. The total came to $4.5 million, stolen systematically over the past 3 years. "This is criminal fraud," he said bluntly. "You need to take this to the authorities and your family immediately." I thanked him and took the report. The web of deception was unraveling faster than my sister expected. She had no idea an outside professional was documenting her crimes with forensic precision. The family dinner started normally enough. My mother had made her famous lasagna. My father poured wine. Conversation flowed around the table about ordinary things, work, weather, weekend plans. My sister sat across from me, relaxed and smiling, completely at ease. She thought she was safe. Then I let it slip. Just casually, mid-conversation, while reaching for the bread basket. "Oh, by the way, I got all those files recovered from my laptop. The IT specialist did an amazing job. Everything's back, actually better organized than before." The effect was immediate. My sister's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Her smile stayed fixed on her face, but her eyes went cold and sharp. My mother looked confused. "What happened to your laptop?" I kept my tone light, almost bored. "Oh, it got damaged a few weeks ago. But Malcolm, he's this genius IT guy downtown, he recovered every single file. Spreadsheets, emails, bank records. Everything." I met my sister's eyes directly. "Isn't that great? I thought I'd lost important trust documents, but they're all perfectly preserved now." The color drained from her face. She tried to maintain her composure, but I saw the panic flash behind her eyes. My father asked something about data recovery, and I answered easily, watching my sister's forced smile crack at the edges. Tension hung over the table like a thunderstorm about to break. Nobody else seemed to notice. But she knew. And she knew that I knew she knew. I started asking questions. Not aggressive or accusatory, just curious and innocent-sounding questions that referenced documents she thought were destroyed. At a family meeting about trust business, I mentioned a specific transfer date. "I was reviewing the February statements," I said, flipping through my folder. "There was a $75,000 withdrawal on the 15th. What was that for again?" My sister shifted in her seat. "I'd have to check my notes." "Oh, I have it here," I replied, pulling out a printed email. "It says it was for investment diversification. But I don't see where that money was reinvested. Do you have those records?" She faltered, stumbling over her words. "I'll have to look for them." Later, at my parents' house, I asked about another transaction while she was present. "The April wire transfer to that account in the Cayman Islands, that was temporary, right? The funds were returned?" Her face went pale. "How do you know about that?" "It's in the trust records," I said calmly. "I've been organizing everything." Each question I asked was deliberate, referencing specific details she thought were buried. Her composure slipped a little more each time. She became defensive, then angry, then confused. She couldn't understand how I had such detailed information. The laptop was destroyed. But somehow I kept producing documents, dates, and numbers that exposed her lies piece by piece. I broke down alone in my apartment that night. The weight of everything finally crushed through my calm exterior. I sat on my bathroom floor and cried until my throat hurt and my eyes swelled. Months of suppressed hurt poured out. Anger at her betrayal. Sadness for the sister I thought I knew. Disbelief that someone I'd loved and defended could steal from our family so callously. I thought about all the times I'd stood up for her. When she'd failed out of college, I'd convinced our parents to give her another chance. When she'd lost job after job, I'd helped her rebuild her resume and practice interviews. When she'd needed money, I'd loaned her thousands of dollars she never repaid. And this was how she'd repaid my loyalty, with fraud, lies, and attempted destruction of evidence. The tears turned to rage. Then the rage hardened into something colder and more focused. I stood up, washed my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red, but behind them was steel. This wasn't defeat. This was fuel. Every tear I'd cried would power my next move. She thought I was weak because I cared. She'd confused kindness with stupidity. That would be her fatal mistake. I wasn't giving up. I was planning the perfect, methodical exposure that would leave no room for lies or escape. The email came from my Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother. He lived across the country and stayed mostly disconnected from family business, visiting only for major holidays. His message was brief: "Frankie, I need to talk to you privately. About your sister and the trust. Call me." I called him immediately. Robert's voice was cautious but determined. "I've been suspicious for a while," he admitted. "Last Christmas, your sister was showing off expensive jewelry. She said she'd gotten a promotion, but I knew her job situation wasn't that stable. Then I started noticing things when I visited: the new car, designer clothes, expensive vacations she kept posting online. It didn't add up with what she claimed to earn." He paused. "I requested trust statements last month. Took me a while to get through the financial jargon, but I found discrepancies. Money moving in ways that didn't make sense. I didn't know who to talk to because I didn't want to cause family drama if I was wrong." "You're not wrong," I said quietly. "I've been documenting everything." We talked for an hour. Robert had his own evidence, separate from mine. He'd tracked social media posts showing expensive purchases, matched them against trust withdrawal dates, and created a timeline. Combined with my recovered files and the auditor's report, we now had an airtight case from multiple sources. My sister never suspected her distant uncle was watching and documenting her lifestyle inflation. The phone call happened by accident. My sister thought she'd muted herself during a family video chat, but the technology failed her. We were all on a group call discussing holiday plans when she stepped away from her camera. Her microphone was still live. We heard her talking to someone in the background, her voice full of arrogance. "They're so clueless," she said with a laugh. "Sitting there planning Christmas like everything's normal. Frankie's been quiet lately, probably finally gave up trying to play detective. Poor thing never had the spine for confrontation anyway." The person on the other end said something we couldn't hear. "The money? Completely safe. I've moved it through enough accounts that even a forensic auditor would have trouble tracing it. And even if they did, what are they going to do? Turn their own daughter in?" Another pause. "Trust me, I know this family. They value peace over truth. They'll convince themselves nothing's wrong rather than face the reality that their perfect daughter has been stealing from them for years." I recorded the entire conversation. My mother and father were also on the call, their faces frozen in shock. Uncle Robert, joining from California, stared at his screen in disbelief. When my sister came back to the camera, smiling and asking where we were in the discussion, nobody spoke. The dominoes had started falling, and she didn't even realize she'd pushed them herself. I became a ghost. At family gatherings, I smiled pleasantly but said little. When my sister made jokes or told stories, I laughed politely. I asked her friendly questions about her life and listened to her answers without challenging obvious lies. To anyone watching, I seemed to have moved on from whatever tension had existed between us. I appeared forgiving, or at least neutral. My sister's guard dropped. She started getting comfortable again, her confidence returning. She assumed I'd given up on confronting her. She thought my silence meant defeat rather than strategy. She'd underestimated me so completely that she started getting careless. She mentioned expensive purchases openly. She talked about investment opportunities she claimed to be exploring. She even started giving financial advice at family dinners, acting like an expert while sitting on millions of stolen dollars. I let her talk. I let her feel safe. Every careless word, every arrogant assumption, every moment of overconfidence added to the evidence file growing in my possession. Strategic silence turned out to be more powerful than any confrontation could have been. I watched her dig her own grave deeper with every passing week, and she thought she was building a throne instead. The call came from my sister's colleague, someone I'd met briefly at a company event months ago. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she said nervously, "but I think you should know about some financial irregularities we've noticed." Apparently, my sister had been working on a side venture through her company, positioning herself as a financial consultant for small businesses. Several clients had reported money missing from accounts my sister had access to. Nothing massive, a few thousand here and there, but enough to form a pattern. "We're conducting an internal investigation," the colleague explained. "But when I saw your name listed as her emergency contact, I thought you might want to know. Especially since some of the transaction patterns match what we're seeing in her personal account activity." I thanked her and immediately documented the conversation. This was beyond the family trust now. My sister's fraud extended into her professional life. She'd been so successful stealing from family that she'd expanded her operation. I gathered all the evidence from this new source. Company emails, client complaints, transaction records that the colleague was willing to share confidentially. Added to everything else I had, the picture became crystal clear. My sister wasn't just an opportunistic thief who'd taken advantage of family trust. She was a systematic fraudster who'd made stealing a lifestyle. The shift was subtle at first. My father started asking more questions during trust discussions. My mother seemed less enthusiastic about my sister's stories. At Sunday dinner, when my sister mentioned planning another expensive vacation, my parents exchanged a glance I hadn't seen before: doubt. I hadn't said anything directly to them. I'd simply let information filter through naturally. Uncle Robert had sent them copies of the trust statements he'd requested, highlighted with notes about unusual transactions. The family friend who'd noticed my sister's defensive behavior had mentioned it to my mother in passing. The cousin who'd commented on the expensive car had asked my father if the trust had given out bonuses recently. None of it was accusatory. Just questions, observations, and concerns that created a web of suspicion around my sister. She began noticing the change. The way conversation stopped when she entered rooms. The glances and whispers between family members. She couldn't identify the source because there wasn't a single source. The doubt was everywhere, growing from multiple directions, fed by her own actions and lifestyle that didn't match her supposed income. I watched anxiety creep into her expression. She became defensive about innocent questions. She snapped at people more often. The confident, charming facade was cracking, and she didn't know how to repair it because she didn't understand what was breaking it. Her name was Veronica, and she'd been my sister's best friend in college. They'd been inseparable for years until a falling out 2 years ago that my sister never wanted to discuss. Veronica reached out through social media with a careful message: "I heard through mutual friends that you might be looking into your sister's finances. I have information you should see." We met for coffee. Veronica looked nervous but determined. She pulled out a folder filled with documents. "When we were still friends, your sister asked me to help her set up some offshore accounts," Veronica explained. "She said it was for tax purposes, completely legal. I'm an accountant, so I helped her navigate the paperwork. But later I realized what she was really doing. The documents showed account structures designed specifically to hide money. Veronica had kept copies because something had felt wrong. When she cut me off, I suspected it was because I knew too much," Veronica continued. "I've felt guilty ever since for helping her, even unknowingly. When I heard you were investigating, I knew I had to come forward." The evidence Veronica provided was damning. It showed premeditation, planning, and the clear intent to commit fraud. My sister hadn't just stumbled into stealing. She'd carefully constructed a system to do it. This was the piece I'd been missing, proof of criminal intent. I had quietly encouraged Veronica through mutual contacts, but she'd made the brave choice herself. I worked late into the night, organizing everything. The recovered laptop files, arranged chronologically. The auditor's report, highlighting every fraudulent transaction. Uncle Robert's evidence of lifestyle inconsistencies. The accidental phone call recording where she'd boasted about her crimes. Documentation from her company showing professional fraud. Veronica's evidence of the offshore account structures. Screenshots of social media posts showing expensive purchases. Bank statements. Email chains. Legal opinions from attorneys confirming this constituted criminal fraud. I created a presentation, clean and professional, that told the complete story. No emotion, no accusations, just facts presented in an undeniable sequence. Each piece of evidence built on the last, creating a picture so clear that no amount of charm or lies could obscure it. The moment of exposure was near. I could feel electricity running through me every time I reviewed the materials. Years of theft, months of deception, weeks of meticulous evidence gathering, it all came down to this. The family remained mostly unaware of the storm about to hit. My sister thought she'd successfully buried her crimes. She had no idea that tomorrow would destroy the life she'd built on stolen money and lies. I sent the invitations on a Thursday. Family lunch this Sunday, I wrote. My treat. I have some important updates about the trust to discuss. The message was cheerful, casual, the kind I'd sent dozens of times before. My parents accepted immediately. Uncle Robert said he'd video call in. Other family members confirmed attendance. My sister was the last to respond. Sounds good, she wrote. Should I bring anything? Just yourself, I replied. Sunday morning, I was surprisingly calm. I'd spent 3 sleepless nights imagining this moment, but now that it had arrived, peace settled over me. I arranged the documents in folders for each family member. I tested the projector that would display key evidence. I prepared simple food that no one would really eat once the meeting started. My sister arrived early, surprisingly cheerful. She even helped me set up chairs, completely relaxed and unsuspecting. You seem in a good mood, she commented. Something good happen? I smiled at her. Just ready for some closure on a few things. She nodded, not understanding the weight behind my words. As family members arrived, she greeted them warmly, hugged my parents, joked with cousins. She appeared perfectly at ease, the picture of innocence. She truly believed she'd outsmarted everyone. That overconfidence, that complete certainty of victory, was about to be her complete undoing. I waited until everyone was seated, drinks poured, small talk concluded. Then I stood up, calm and composed. Thank you all for coming, I began. I asked you here because I've discovered something important about our family trust that everyone needs to know. I distributed the folders. Please open them and follow along. I started from the beginning. The first suspicious transaction I'd noticed. The investigation I'd quietly begun. The evidence I'd carefully gathered. I spoke calmly, letting the documents speak louder than my words. I showed the bank statements with highlighted withdrawals. I displayed emails where my sister had authorized transfers to accounts she controlled. I played portions of the recording where she'd bragged about covering her tracks. My father's face went from confusion to shock to anger. My mother's hands trembled as she turned pages. Uncle Robert watched through the video screen, his expression grim. My sister sat frozen, her face draining of color with each new piece of evidence I presented. Over 3 years, I continued, $4.5 million was systematically stolen from our family trust. I showed the offshore accounts. The fake investment companies. The falsified reports she'd submitted. When I finished, the room was absolutely silent. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every manipulation laid bare in undeniable detail. My sister's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. There was nothing left to say. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and complete. My sister tried to speak. "This is... Frankie, you don't understand." I was going to. But my father cut her off. "Don't." His voice was cold, harder than I'd ever heard it. "Don't insult us further with more lies." My mother was crying silently, looking at documents like they were written in a foreign language she couldn't quite translate. The daughter she'd raised couldn't possibly be the person described in these papers. But she was. Uncle Robert spoke from the screen, his voice steady and disappointed. "I've already contacted the family attorney. This needs to go to the authorities." My sister stood up suddenly, knocking her chair backward. "You're all overreacting. I can explain everything." But the room remained silent. No one believed her anymore. No one wanted her explanations. Cousin stared at her with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. My parents wouldn't meet her eyes. The empire of deception she'd built was collapsing under its own weight, and she could only watch it fall. She looked at me finally, and in her eyes, I saw the moment she truly understood. I hadn't given up. I'd been 10 steps ahead the entire time. The destruction of my laptop hadn't ended anything. It had just delayed the inevitable. "I should have known," she whispered. Then she grabbed her purse and left, her footsteps echoing through the silent house. The laptop sat on my desk, fully restored and functioning perfectly. The stolen money was being recovered through legal channels, the offshore accounts frozen by authorities. My reputation remained untarnished. In fact, family members now came to me with questions about protecting their own finances. I'd started a small financial consulting business, helping people secure their assets and recognize fraud. My sister faced criminal charges. The investigation expanded beyond our family to include her company fraud. Her life, built on lies and stolen money, unraveled completely. She'd lost everything: family trust, professional credibility, freedom. I didn't feel triumphant watching her fall. I felt relieved. Justice had been served, not through impulsive rage or emotional confrontation, but through patience, intelligence, and methodical documentation. I stood stronger than ever, not because I'd destroyed her, but because I'd refused to be destroyed. The responsible one, the peacemaker, the one everyone underestimated, I'd proven that those qualities weren't weaknesses. They were the foundation of real strength. I breathed freely for the first time in months, knowing that truth, no matter how buried, always finds its way back to light. And sometimes, the quiet ones are the most dangerous to cross.